There we go. Welcome everyone to the first session that we are having called the Straight Path. We are doing is we are having phone calls and sessions with anyone who wants to learn more about pathways. And the way that it's set up is that we're going to have a really awesome session from someone who has completed a path so they can talk about their experiences of what they've actually done. And then we're going to go ahead and have question and answers for that individual. And then we're going to have an educational session, which is going to be presented today by Brian Shields. And then we'll have question and answer for him as well. So thank you once again, everyone, for attending. And I would actually like to ask Don to go first. He will be speaking on his experiences with the dynamic leadership path. Thank you so much for being here, Don. Don?
Thank you, Belinda, for inviting me to give this presentation. Today, I'm going to go through the dynamic leadership path. This set of slides that I have here is almost what I gave during my presentation for reflect on my path. On level 5, the very last speech is about reflecting on your path. So this is almost the same set of slides I did. Okay, so for level 1 on the dynamic leadership path, there are 3 speeches that you got to do. You all know that icebreaker is the very first speech, which I did in April 2018. And then I did an evaluation. And then I did the icebreaker second time, according to the level 1 specifications. Then the last project on level 1 was on research and present. On the very first speech, what I was trying to do was to go through all the places where I lived and explain to everyone what my experiences were. And for 5 minutes, I was trying to cram in a lot of information. So in Sri Lanka, I live, it's a beautiful country, a lot of beautiful things. In the left, you see the elephants that are used in the Kandy pageant in the middle of Sri Lanka. And on the right, you have Sigiriya, which is a rock fortress, which one of the kings made his capital. And it's a beautiful country. So I touched upon the fact that I lived in Sri Lanka for the first 29 years of my life. And then I lived in New Zealand. On the right, you had the punting, boat punts in River Avon in Christchurch, which is on the South Island. And on the left, you have the Trans-Alpine Railway that goes from Christchurch to Greymouth across picturesque and beautiful mountains of the South Island of New Zealand. And thirdly, I lived in Asheville, North Carolina. Again, a beautiful place with a lot of waterfalls. You have the Biltmore Estate. I really enjoyed living 16 years of my life. So I talked a lot of things about where I lived for my icebreaker speech. And then for my research and present, I thought, okay, I should talk about another place that I do not know about. So I touched upon the Renaissance period in Florence, Italy, where similar to today, you had the Black Plague in the 15th century, and how they got out of that was, people like Da Vinci, all the great thinkers were doing their thinking, very, very intelligent thinking, that's how they got out of it. So intelligence is the key to getting rid of a plague like this that we have. So Renaissance was a great period in Italy. So I touched the Italian architecture and various things happened in Italy on my research and present speech. When you come to level 2, now it becomes a little bit complicated. You cannot just look at any subject. So it concentrates on leadership, communication, and mentorship, and life as a protege. So when it came to leadership, one of my most respected leaders in the whole world actually is President Abraham Lincoln, due to many reasons. He said, government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. His sayings and the way he did look after the Union during the Civil War is still a very good example to follow. You know, sometimes he acted almost alone. So his democratic leadership. So we were asked to talk about different leadership styles. So I picked on democratic leadership, and I thought you should get. I said you should get consensus from all the people before making a decision. You listen to all different viewpoints. You finally make a decision, but the viewpoints of everybody is important. And then when it came to communication, I thought truth is a very important part of communication. So as Prime Minister Winston Churchill aptly said, the truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is. It comes out eventually. I love Winston Churchill as a very excellent communicator, because there are different communication styles. So I explained how I was using all that, but I said truth is what I want to communicate. Then came the third speech on level 2 on my life as a protege. So here you see my parents. So they were my first and foremost mentors. You know, this was taken in 1961, and they nurtured me so well by inculcating good values in me. And they were my foremost mentors. So my life as a protege was carved out of all the good examples and teachings that they imparted on me. Then it came to level 3. The very first speech on level 3 on the dynamic leadership path is on negotiate the best outcome. There I talked about my current project, which is on the Motorola. It is on the motor turbo nitro system, which I will talk a little bit later. And then I had to pick 2 electives for level 3. So I picked the understanding vocal variety and connect with storytelling. So I will get into a little bit more detail here. So during explaining or doing the speech on understanding vocal variety, what I did was I spoke about the Sri Lankan ethnic conflict. Sri Lanka had a ethnic conflict that ran for 26 years, running from 1982 to 2009, where there were separatist militants in the north who were trying to separate from Sri Lanka. So I try to dramatize all the experiences I had in Sri Lanka, where even some of the unrest also prevailed in the south where I lived in. I lived in Colombo for 29 years, and all my experiences that I had in Sri Lanka during the ethnic conflict, I try to dramatize and try to use vocal variety to give that. And also I gave that speech for my international speech contest in February 2019 at Motorola. And then on the second speech on a storyline, I actually gave a situation where a young mother who lost her child and how she was instructed by the Buddha, by the parable of the mustard seed, where he asked her to go around all the houses and find some mustard seed from a house where nobody has died before. So she was very perplexed after the loss of her child, and she could not find any mustard seed where nobody has died. And she finally realized what Buddha taught her. So this was a parable, very an ancient story that I told there. So then came level 4. And the very first speech on level 4 is on managing change. In that I talked about the 4 divine abodes. And on the elective, there I selected a question and answer session that was on my project here at Motorola, which I will give the details a little bit later. And when you are managing change, my argument there was, you got to have the 4 divine abodes. Anything, when life is in incessant change. When you get any stimulus from any of the 5 senses, you got to handle that with loving friendliness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. There was unrest recently. How do you alleviate that? You should have a loving friendliness, universal loving friendliness, regardless of the color, race, creed, or anything. And also you need to have compassion for everyone, even animals. Got to be compassionate. Appreciative joy is the fact that you will be happy about people who are more successful than you are. If you see a more successful person that lives in a better house and has a bigger car, or intellectually more superior than you are, you've got to appreciate their success. That is appreciated joy. And equanimity, finally, is the fact that, there are ups and downs in life. You cannot avoid that. You should learn to have an equanimous state of mind without getting too involved. You can't prevent hunger in the world. You can't solve all the problems that are existing in the world. You've got to be equanimous. There will be ups and downs everywhere. You have to handle that with equanimity. Then I told you this is the project that I am working on. So on several stages, I explained about Motor Turbo Nitro. This is like a system that you used with cell phones. But one thing unique about this is can be used more on parking lots, low power situations, right? So if you take a LTE mast, which Verizon and AT&T are using, that would transmit a lot of power across the whole radius of about maybe 4 or 5 miles. But these devices, that is manufactured by Motorola, when you install this, it will cover a parking lot or inside of a mall, but more secure than Wi-Fi, but uses less power than LTE that is used by cell phones. So this is unique technology that we are manufacturing here at Motorola. It gives unique opportunities to users and our customers. And I talked about different aspects of this project. On leadership, I thought how I talked about how I worked with the third-party companies to develop this product, the various aspects. So I learned from Toastmasters on how to deal with all these third-party companies, and it had been a win-win relationship for me. I learned a lot from Toastmasters. I applied that for my projects, and also I brought in some of the technology that I learned there and made people aware of that. So it was a win-win relationship. Then came level 5. So the first one was lead in any situation, which, yeah, I gave a speech on that. I will cover that a little bit later. Then the elective I did was on lessons learned. And again, I touched upon the lessons I learned from my project here at Motorola on Motorola CBRS network, and how I make use of the Toastmasters experience also there. And then the reflect on part, as I told earlier, was the incorporated all these slides. So in leading in any situation, what I talked about is the power of why. Whatever you do, it's very important that you understand why you are doing something rather than the what and the how. That makes people successful. Walt Disney was so keen on his why was to make a world that is so magical. So all his movies, animated movies with Mickey Mouse and so on, all his theme parks, always he touched upon that magical experience. That was the why. And the how and the what got developed from there. And so he was so good at that. And that why drove him to enormous success in life. Now on the right, you have the person whose name this road is marked against. Her name is can anybody guess what her name is?
Madam Curie?
No, not Madam Curie. Yeah, I-90 stretch in front of Motorola. Her name is Jane Addams. So Jane Addams had real struggles in life. She wanted to be a medical student, but she never succeeded in that. And later on, she became a social service worker. And her why was to take care of people. And initially she wanted to be a doctor, but she was not successful with that. But she became a social service worker and did a lot of work in Chicago to take care of young women and adult women. And she did a great deal of work here. And in conclusion, I would like to quote the founder of Toastmasters, Ralph C. Smedley. Whatever your grade or position, if you know how and when to speak and when to remain silent, your chances of real success are proportionately increased. This is something that I learned during giving all the speeches of the dynamic leadership path. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Not only did I learn about the dynamic leadership path, I learned about a lot of other things as well. So thank you so much for bringing that information to us and providing us with all that knowledge. Does anyone have any questions for Don?
Don, I have a question for you. What resonated what resonated with you so strongly? Because when you were showing Walt Disney and of course Jane Addams, who we know, it was interesting that you mentioned about her getting to the social aspects of it. But what really resonated with you, stood out in your mind in terms of leadership? Because we know how creative Walt Disney was, but what really, how did you connect with him in terms of thinking about your leadership path?
Yeah, Walt Disney is somebody, one of my mentors. Actually, most of my mentors, they are kind of ideal mentors in the sense they're not physically present, but
Right.
he was a great mentor. I learned a lot from him. The simplicity. He's a great guy. It's all about kids. He wanted to inspire kids. He wanted to make kids follow the right path. With all good things, with fun, loving environment, and while doing that, he built a wonderful organization. I think in the business world, he's the number one person who inspired me. What a great concept, and without any kind of malice or anything, it's very straightforward, positive experience you get. So it's somebody whom I admire as a great leader.
See, I think that Walt Disney, because he's also, I could say indirectly, one of my mentors, is that he had tremendous vision, because what he could see way beyond and into the future in terms of what he wanted to build, people couldn't wrap their heads around that because he was so forward thinking. And the same thing when you mention Abraham Lincoln, I mean, two distinct styles of leadership. So one had a vision for something where we could just visit this magical, imaginary place. Then on the other hand, Abraham Lincoln, who also I agree with is one of the greatest leaders in history, he had vision because he saw at that time back in the 1800s, he had a vision for how he could bring people together and not segregate the South and the North, and people of color, of course, at that time. So, but it's interesting that the corollary between the two, when you have Walt Disney on the one hand, Imagineer, and then Abraham Lincoln, completely different eras, completely different time periods. So that was interesting.
I totally agree with you, Jerry. It's wonderful to hear you, sharing almost the same type of, mentors eventually, and inspired by these two leaders. That they are great leaders. I'm so inspired by them.
It was interesting too, just one last comment, how you tied up with Dr. Smedley, because back in 1924, and of course his various attempts, not failures, but various attempts to get the Toastmasters organization going. And so again, taking, Abraham Lincoln, taking Walt Disney, because back in the time with Walt Disney, and then, 1924, Dr. Smedley, and how he had this vision about how he could bring young men together to learn how to speak in public and how to chair a meeting. I mean, interesting, the corollary between the three. So again, that was a nice conclusion to it.
Thanks, Jerry. I totally agree with everything you said. It's three great leaders. These leaders are the ones that keep us going.
Thank you for that question, Jerry. Are there any other questions for Don? Bella?
So I was thinking that with this project, and Pathways project is to develop the leadership skills by looking at, like your examples today showed people and places that have great leaders, and your takeaways from this program that you did, the Path, how did you grow in your own leadership dynamics? What did you finish the Path saying, oh my gosh, this is so different for me. I feel like I've gained this much growth? What was it that you felt after?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Stella. It's a very excellent question as well. Yes, I started reading books, more books on leadership. Actually, my next path is visionary communication. And I started reading, I read through three big books on leadership, one on Abraham Lincoln, again, more on the Civil War side, again, was very inspiring. And then the second one I read on Colin Powell, again, a very good patriot in the US, did a lot of service to the US. And the third one was a business leader called Campbell, William Campbell, who inspired Google and so many companies in the Silicon Valley, and the wealth that he generated through all these leaders were greater than $1 trillion. And what he said was the team was the most important building block of an organization, which I totally agree. He looks at team dynamics rather than individuals. So I started reading these books, and that helps me go more forward in the path of leadership. And before that, there was no audience. I read books, but sometimes my mind asks me, what for? What are you going to gain from all this? But now, when you can present what you find, and people are ardently listening to you, it gives a great feedback, great experience, and I value that so much.
The one thing I really enjoyed about your speech was that you talked about different parts of the world, but then you brought in leaders that weren't necessarily from your hometown or your home country. You looked at the globe and you picked out people that were from all over the place. And that to me was a really nice touch.
Yes, thank you. Yes, with all these leaders, one thing is that, they are true leaders. They stick to their principles, and every action they do go with the principles. I love such leaders who are genuine. A true leader is a genuine leader who speaks what he acts upon and who acts what he speaks. So these leaders were greatly inspiring because of that fact.
So basically you became more inspired to be a leader yourself by reading up and doing this path on leadership. You found yourself questing to learn new leadership skills, right?
That is true. It is happening more subconsciously than, I will, now I agree with what you're saying, but I think that is happening more subconsciously rather than more deliberately, I may say. But a good question. It really makes me think more about what you're saying there. Thank you.
And the last question I have for you is, this was your first path, right? So this is the path you chose when you became a Toastmaster, right?
That's correct.
Doesn't that say a lot when you pick out a path that kind of tells you where your destiny is almost at, because that was your first choice?
Yes, thank you. The Toastmasters website helped me select the path. They asked those questions, and maybe I answered in such a way that they thought, at least the developers thought, this is the path I should follow. And I agree. This should have been the path that I should have selected. And even the second one, which is further emphasizes the visionary communication, further emphasize the leadership, dynamic leadership, which is visionary communication, is, I think, a very good path as well. So I'm looking forward to completing that. Actually, I'm picking up various speeches from different levels now. You know, unlike those last time, you had to complete. You don't have to complete a specific path to go into a specific level to get into a different level. But I'm picking speeches from 2, 3, and 4 all the, randomly right now. But hopefully I should complete that. That's a great path as well. Could further emphasize the leadership.
And today you are an area director, which is a huge leadership path for you.
Yes, I agree, Stella. Thank you. Yeah, so looking forward to serving District 30 as an area director and helping the district move along.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Melinda, I have to share this. Don, can you stop your screen share?
Okay.
So this, I don't know if you can see it or not, this book right here, I always keep it on my desktop. And that's The Wit and Wisdom of Abraham Lincoln.
Right. Yeah. Sounds like a good book, and yeah, I'll try to get it from Schomburg Library.
Just thought I would throw that out there.
Thank you.
Just happen to have it handy.
I think it was Feet telling us that we need to read that book. I think that's what it's saying. I think that's, we all need to run out and go get that book and find some insight, because I think that there's so many things that we can do as leaders, and we're all leaders, and we all are leaders in our club, or in our community, in Toastmasters, even in our household, we're leaders, and we could always use a little bit of inspiration. So thank you for sharing that, Jerry. I appreciate it.
And you don't even have to have a title.
Exactly.
Sometimes your cat or dog is really the leader in your house.
Yeah.
I can't try.
Very true. Very true. Or another person is a leader if you're at their house. I won't mention any names.
I'm just curious, on a personal note, since we're talking about this path called, leadership, going around, I would love to hear what your favorite, what is your favorite book or movie that has to do with leadership, because I think that is such a great way to learn. I'd like to ask Brian, what is your favorite book or movie that kind of reflects leadership skills?
So for me, I would say the answer to that, it's an old book, still good and still relevant today. I would say Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. While some of the principles in that book, involve, I guess it's older, I feel it's still relevant today, some of those skills that it teaches, and even probably more so in like a digital age on, actually taking the time to listen to people and making an effort to maybe use people's names when you're speaking to them. I feel there's a lot of the stuff when I was going through it seems like common sense, but then when you look around you, you see a lot of people don't really use the advice in that book. And I feel by doing that, it can make you a more influential person, a more influential leader, and be just someone that people have more respect for.
That's very good. Very good. What about you, Melinda? I'm curious, what movie, what book? Yeah, I can't hear you.
I'm thinking, and I cannot think of one specific thing or book that really helps shape my leadership. I really feel that there's a lot of different things that make me feel empowered, and I feel that that is the most important thing. I do have like a book of quotes that has like a lot of leadership quotes in it, and I find for me the snips of like these like quotes that are just like these like juicy kind of sink your teeth into quotes that just revolutionize your way of thinking in your life. I think I even used one of the quotes when I was competing in table topics at one point in time. And I think for me, that particular book, I can't remember the name of it. I know where it is in my house, but I think that book, the quotes about life and leadership really just empower me, and that has driven me and helped me in my leadership.
And talking about quotes, you know, Jerry, don't you think that Don did a really nice job with adding quotes into his presentation?
Yes, yes.
That was really nicely done. And the way he presented it in his slides, I thought they were really attractive.
Nice, clean, and simple.
Thank you, Stella.
So what
Appreciate it.
about you, Jerry? I mean, I saw you showed me the Abraham Lincoln book, but I know you have more because look at the bookcase behind you.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Jerry. Apart from it, yeah, I think about the leaders that I talked about, we all agree. You and I definitely, and I think all of us agree. Apart from these people, who, if I ask you to name 1 to 3 people, whom will you name? Of course, there are so many, but
Yeah, that's sort of a loaded question, and because there are so many. Certainly, again, going back to what you mentioned, Abraham Lincoln, because Lincoln on Leadership, I've read that book over and over again. That, to me, like Brian was talking about Dale Carnegie, I mean, there's certain books that are timeless, that doesn't matter when they were written, the message is still as pertinent today that it was when the book was originally written. Walt Disney, I've read his biography over and over again. If I were to show you my library, I probably have, because I break it down into leadership, into public speaking, into econ, marketing, sales. But since Stella asked me the question, the one guy, current leader, that I think is just absolutely amazing because of what he's able to accomplish is Richard Branson. Richard Branson has started over 400 companies. And when you talk about vision and creativity and imagination and the way that he treats his employees, the way that he, for all the billions that he's worth, he's still, people might put him up on the billion pedestal, you know, all these billionaires. But when you listen to him, he's so down to earth. And you think, wow, he's worth X amount of billions. I don't know what the exact number is because I know what Bill Gates is worth. I know what Warren Buffett is worth. But to start 400 companies, and he started for very humble beginnings. He started originally in the record industry, and then he built on from there, and then of course Virgin Airlines and all these other companies that he started. So he's one that I certainly admire because I think the one key, and I can't remember, Stella, and this is really, I think, key to Toastmasters, is a book that I've read numerous times on servant leadership, heart-centered leadership. And I think that the greatest leaders of all time were heart-centered leaders. They were servant leaders because it wasn't about ego, because there's a pastor that said that ego is the antiseptic that deadens the pain of stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
Ego's the antiseptic that deadens the pain of stupidity.
Right.
Because
Yes.
when people get caught up as leaders, Stella and I have had this conversation numerous times, people get caught up in their egos and it's all about them. As leaders, it's never about us, ever. When we veer off the path to where, you know, the spotlight is on us, oh, look at me, what a great leader I am. If you have to go around bragging about what a great leader you are, I think you've lost touch with reality and with the people that we serve, especially in Toastmasters, even personally and professionally. Because dictator leaders, Stella and I have talked about this over and over again, dictatorial style, authoritative style, bulldog style, bureaucratic leadership, you know, we define all the different styles of leadership. Those are not servant leaders. Sometimes in leadership, we know we have to be autocratic sometimes because we have to take the information, process the information, and make a decision based on that. But we can't straddle the fence forever. And sometimes as leader, we have to make those tough and hard decisions. But back to Stella's question. So servant leadership, Richard Branson, certainly Abraham Lincoln, Lincoln on Leadership, and Walt Disney. I recommend everybody read the biography of Walt Disney because there's so many lessons in that. And we know how flexible and adaptable we have to be in this Toastmaster environment especially today in the virtual platform that we're all challenged with.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah.
So, oh, by the way, I have about 1,500 to 2,000 books in my library. It's been a lifelong pursuit.
Yes. You know, actually, I know Jerry for a long time, and I think our first conversations were based on personal development books, and that was a long time ago. So I'm sure that you added up quite a bit since then in books.
Brian mentioned Dale Carnegie. That was one of the first books back when I was already in high school and going into college, along with Napoleon Hill. A lot of people read that. But I have one of my proudest books, one of the books that I actually have a signed copy by Dale Carnegie. And it was one that he wrote originally, and then another copy that his wife, she redid How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's kind of a compilation of different things that he wrote. And Dick Storer, who I think most of you know, when I received my CC, he gave me a signed copy from Dr. Smedley.
Wow.
And that's one of my prized possessions in my library.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Pretty cool stuff.
So what's the next path
For Don or for me?
for Don?
Yeah, I said it's visionary communication. Yeah, I love that part as well. It's actually accentuates the dynamic leadership part. So I think I'm learning. It's actually up to now what I've done is doing the dynamic leadership speeches again, not the same ones, but the same, almost the same speeches. But now I had to pick, next I had to pick things that are unique to visionary communication.
That's your next path, right?
That is my next path.
You know what's interesting is that your dynamic leadership path, that's my second path.
What was your first?
What do you think my first path was, Stella?
Oh, it's got to be. It has to be about something about being a dynamic, not MC, but I don't know, maybe something about, I don't know, you tell me.
Presentation mastery.
That's the one.
I'd like to give a presentation on presentation mastery at one of these sessions.
Yes.
I'm looking for people who completed paths. I think that you would be excellent.
Yes, you would be great at that.
Well, Don said something really interesting, because I'm with Don, because Virginia taught me this, and all of you know Virginia, is that because in the beginning we know in Pathways, which is a tip that I tell people all the time, that you can dive into all these different paths and you can kind of take them for a test run. And so she goes, well, you can go into all these electives. So I started hopscotching around the different paths and doing the electives. I've been banking, God knows, a lot of speeches in the various paths. But going back to what Don, he reminded me, that is so awesome, because if someone says, well, I'm kind of interested in this path, they don't have to buy that path or get into the path, but they can still get the projects in that path, right? And they can still deliver a speech. They can still be evaluated on it. They just bank it. So when they actually formally enroll in that path, I thought that was so awesome.
No. I think yeah. Probably I did not communicate that correctly, Jerry. You had to buy the path, but what I did was I went through different levels. You know, I picked speeches from level 4 while not done with level 2. That's what I meant.
Right. But I'm just saying, you can jump around to the different paths without having to enroll in that path. You just can't get formal credit for it.
Oh, okay. All right. That's, yeah. Okay. I haven't done that actually. Can you even, are you even allowed to look at a path without purchasing it? Yeah, I'm not
I
sure.
will leave that to our program quality director. She can certainly answer that question.
Well, there is a lovely manual that came out some time ago that allows you to see what everything is and go
Oh, okay.
into all of
Ah,
the
yeah,
paths
true,
into a little
true.
more
Yeah,
detail
yeah.
to find out about all the projects. Yeah. So you can
Right,
at
right.
least
Yeah,
find out a little bit about the paths before you dive into it and you commit to it. It's like, oh, this one's really cool. This one has this. Some of them have HPL, some of them don't. So maybe you don't want to do an HPL. You can
Right.
tailor your learning experience to what you want to do.
And even in the drop-down menu on the club websites, when you go in to click on presentation mastery, dynamic leadership, innovative planning, whatever it might be, it'll drop down the project description and the evaluation form. So you can even take a look at that. And that's awesome. Because that gives people, like Belinda said, if they want to customize it to something that they're working on, they can really drill down to that.